Anybody else a little bit nervous when they read this jewel and ailment mitigation manifesto? I want to be excited. I want to be, hyped for this. I've seen the post by Bex over on Twitter saying, hey boys, we got lots of cool stuff in the background. Let's get ready for it. It's going to be fun. I know it's been a rough couple of months, but after reading this Jewels and Ailment Mitigation Balance Manifesto, I am very torn because nowadays when I read certain things that GGG says, I'm always looking for the negatives, and it kind of sucks that it feels that way because there is a lot of potential positives here, but there's also a lot of potential negatives here. So we're going to go into it. There's a lot to talk about when it comes to the manifestos coming up to 3.20, because I do feel that this patch is pretty integral to the future of Path of Exile in general. So you'll have to forgive me a little bit. My beard is a little unkempt and my head is unshaved, but it is what it is. I wasn't expecting this to come out today. That's why this video is so late. But remember, boys, if you're enjoying this content, make sure to give this video a like, subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit that notification bell to stay up to date with all the latest videos. And without further ado, let's get into it. All right, boys, let's begin. The 3.20 Balance Manifesto Numero Uno Jewels and Ailment Mitigation. So as they've said, and as you might know, in 3.20 they're making a number of balance changes that will present over several balance manifestos that each cover an individual topic. Now, these topics are a little bit weird, and I'm hoping that there's more to it than just these few topics, but we get what we get. So let's start off with this first problem. Jewels have modifiers that provide various forms of ailment avoidance or protection. However, because their current values are moderately low, you often need to stack several jewels in order to have adequate levels of protection. We feel that this is an excessive amount of investment for how necessary ailment mitigation is to a character's build. This issue has been exacerbated by some of these mods being gated behind corruption, making them more expensive and difficult to acquire. This is kind of an issue I do agree with. One big problem in general with this is the fact that even if you did want to go for these individual modifiers, nowadays, most builds use so many unique jewels that are so powerful for the build that it's really hard to justify enough of these jewels to make it worthwhile to have these like ailment avoidant corruptions and other things like that. Because if you think about it, at the very high end, which you kind of have to do in Path of Exile now, you have to invest into your character. You're using maybe a Forbidden Flesh, Forbidden Flame. You're using like a Watcher's Eye. Maybe you have a unique jewel that's good for your build. And that's like 3 or 4 jewel slots that are already used up. If you need to use any kind of like other specific unique jewels for your build, maybe like a Thread of Hope or anything like that, it leaves very few spaces. Very few spaces. So currently, with the small percentage that you can get of like chill avoidance or ignite avoidance or things like that, it's really hard to stack all of these. However, the solution is slightly worrying. The solution that they're giving us is we're expanding the pool of mods available on magic and rare jewels and are making their modifier values more generous so that players have better access to sources of ailment mitigation with less investment. And they say regular jewels, i.e. jewels that are not abyss or cluster jewels, will now have mods that provide reduced duration or reduced effect for a wider variety of ailments than before. Abyss jewels now have mods that provide avoidance of various ailments. Now, depending on how many of these modifiers there are, depending on how many tiers of these modifiers there are, depending on how, much of each modifier that we get, my thought process, the first thing that jumps to mind here is that, well, they're making it harder to get good jewels. Now, this isn't going to be a problem for Trade League, but if you are someone that likes to play like Solo Self-Found or anything like that, this potentially might just make it harder to get good jewels because now they're adding in potentially a lot of new modifiers on jewels. That's going to make it more difficult to get the correct ones, but that's all up to how many they give us, how good they are, if they're even worth rolling. Like, if each jewel is like 40% chance to avoid chill, I don't know how useful that's really gonna be unless you really stack a lot of them, so we'll see. So, next problem. Many unique jewels are not exciting to find. I agree with this. There are a few reasons for this. In most cases, they are simply underpowered, that is true, or apply to a too narrow window of usage, or both. I don't mind the narrow window of usage. I think that that's fine. I think that it is cool that there are very specific items in Path of Exile, one of the cool things about it. There are also many corruption-only jewels that don't fulfill a good purpose. I agree with that as well. Previously, we were hesitant to revisit unique jewels and improve them beyond their initial designs because many of their themes are somewhat rigid in nature, meaning there is little room to improve them without completely remaking them. I don't necessarily agree with that, but they talk about like Fireborn here, had no values they could increase to make it more useful. I mean, you could have done something like add some fire damage or something to it or whatever else it might be. So the solution that they're giving us for this is we're making it so that every unique jewel that drops is very rare and highly desirable. This line kind of terrifies me because when GGG says something like drops are very rare, that just makes me think that the price of it is going to skyrocket. It's going to be significantly more difficult to get these jewels. I never really like the idea of things becoming substantially more rare. Now, if they're highly desirable, that's fine, but these jewels better have some pretty insanely powerful effects to warrant how rare a lot of these jewels are potentially going to be. I don't like the idea of lots of things becoming very rare. Because if you remember what happened in 3.19, with the changes to a lot of the uniques that they made significantly more rare, those items became very expensive towards the beginning of the league, and that's when like 95% of the people are playing, and it just makes builds more difficult to gear. It makes the stepping stones that you have to take, the wider gaps in between those steps that you have to take, which makes it more frustrating. Don't really like the idea that a lot of these build defining unique jewels are potentially going to be extremely rare. And they also said this means that many existing unique jewels have been removed from the drop pool. This is going to be another one of those situations where like some of the uniques that were removed in 3.19 killed a couple of builds that I thought were pretty cool, and it didn't really seem like there was a reason for those builds to be killed, but I guess it is what it is. Intention is now that when you find a unique jewel, it should almost always be a very positive experience. Yeah, if and when you find them. It just feels like this is going to be another one of those things where it's like, well, now you never really find the unique jewels, so not excited about this. To help make jewels drops more special, we've designed a new set of unique jewels that are powerful chase items. Okay, so they'll be like 40, 50 divine. That's good. These can drop from the core pool. Okay, so probably 60 or 70 divine. You can learn more about these jewels in an upcoming announcement. Okay. With that said, there were some unique jewels that were still useful for a subset of players because they had build-enabling modifiers or other very niche uses, like the Brute Force Illusion or other attribute transformation jewels. Instead of getting rid of these, we've made them corruption-only unique jewels. Now, I don't exactly know how I feel about this, because on one hand, it means that you will have a much easier time trying to go for these, so that is good. However, it also means that this is going to be a big nerf to people who would get like a unique jewel and go for like corrupting blood implicit on it. So, because that's probably just not really going to be possible anymore, I would assume, because you're going to have to corrupt the jewel into it. So that feels kind of a nerf, unfortunately. It makes me think that they're trying to make it harder to get corrupting blood implicit on some of the basic unique jewels that you had before. So I'm not super excited about that, because that means that we're going to have to invest points into either like a corrupting blood immunity ailment mastery, or get it somewhere else. Maybe it'll be a normal stat on jewels now that we have to stack, like it's going to be like 30% chance to avoid corrupting blood or something like that. So it's just putting more pressure on jewel slots instead of making it less pressure, which they said that they were trying to do. So not sure that I feel good about this, because they spin it as saying like generally players who don't want them won't come across them as core drops. I mean, that's fine, but people, I don't know, does that really matter? Because most people play on trade, so if they came across something as a core drop that was good and useful, then they could sell it to other people. So they also said that some build enabling unique jewels have been moved into more deterministic sources, such as combat focus, which can be obtained through a vendor recipe. They also said some things like golem jewels can no longer drop, but can be found from another more deterministic source. And they say, while we want you to discover this new source on your own during gameplay, I would be honest with you, nowadays this just feels more frustrating than anything. So you're moving an entire subset of minion jewels into a source where you're not going to tell us where it is, and we're just going to have to figure it out. So all of the people who want to play golem builds early on are just kind of screwed now. Years ago, maybe I thought that like hunting for these recipes and stuff was cool, but moving build enabling jewels into something where they said we have to just now find it in our own gameplay, kind of frustrating, if anything. So they say that their goal is that finding unique jewels is an exciting experience. This is a terminology that they've been using a lot recently, where they say they want these like exciting moments of experience, but it just keeps pushing it closer and closer and closer to this like gambling simulator, where it's just like you constantly have to just pull the lever over and over and over and over and over again to find the dopamine, and you can't really like naturally progress towards stuff. And I really don't like the way that the game is moving in this general direction. I much more prefer like a consistent experience all the way up to the top, where I can like piecemeal my stuff together and create a build and spend all that time and effort trying to make things naturally, like having all those stepping stones that I can make, instead of it just feeling like I'm just pulling a lever over and over and over and over again until I finally get the good one, and then I can actually have fun. Don't really like that direction that the game is going, and this just feels like more of that. We've worked towards this goal by removing uninteresting unique jewels, adding more chase unique jewels, and moving jewels that do appeal to a smaller subset of players to other places so that they can be pursued by choice. We'll see. I'm not super excited about that, if I'm going to be honest with you. Seems Kind of counterintuitive what they're trying to do, just kind of feels like a big old nerf. Many of the unique jewels that are currently granted through quest rewards are not desirable. I mean, they're okay, but yeah, I agree. Additionally, because they're offered to all players who make their way through the campaign, they're extremely common, which inhibits them from having value or being meaningful items to find. We've also come to feel that it's thematically incorrect to offer unique items as quest rewards, as it undermines their feeling of uniqueness and prestige. Sometimes I feel like GGG takes themselves too seriously. This is one of those sentences that makes me feel like GGG takes themselves too seriously. So, unique jewels will no longer be offered as quest rewards. Most of the jewels that were previously offered have been removed entirely, though some important ones have had their effects preserved in the form of new unique items or by being added to the pool of rollable jewel modifiers. That is interesting, but we're gonna have to see, you know, because there's a couple things that are pretty important, and I'm wondering how many they're actually gonna remove. These quest rewards now offer a random rare jewel. Because the rewards are not static like the unique jewels are, they may have a better chance of being useful to the receiver or something that may be valuable to trade to others. At the very least, they should be less predictable. Players should no longer be burdened with predictable unique jewel quest rewards, but will not entirely miss out on some of the value aspects. This is one of those things. This is one of those sentences. GGG thinks that predictably being able to get something in this game is a burden. Like, I hate being so negative, but 3.19 really turned me into a straight up curmudgeon with these kinds of things. Like, I'm literally just seeking out all of the negatives in like balance manifestos and stuff now, and it's very hard for me to be very positive because they've just kind of spun these as like, oh yeah, these are gonna be so positive, these are gonna be so good, and it always ends up just being huge negatives. So conclusion, jewels should be more exciting than before and provide a better source of ailment mitigation than they were in 3.19. Hope so. Jewels with effects that are only useful to a subset of players should still be attainable while moving them out of the way for players who aren't interested in them. Find more information in the patch notes in 3.20 expansion in the announcement live stream. And as I've said before, we have several other balance manifestos coming out. These will cover topics such as curses, arch nemesis, and eldritch altars, among other things. Honestly, these topics kind of worry me. And that is going to be it for the video. Not super excited about these changes in particular. It just looks like a lot of potential nerfs and annoyances that are being shrouded as buffs, as is pretty typical of GGG these days when it comes to a lot of these balance manifestos. They try to get all the negative stuff out of the way early on and spin it as best they can so they can give you lots of positives when it's time to spend that money. I hate being negative. Hard to be positive these days after the stuff that happened in 3.19, but it is what it is. So remember, boys, if you're enjoying this content, make sure you give this video a like, subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit that notification bell to stay up to date with all the latest videos, and stay safe out there in raid class. And I'll see you guys in the next video.